Welcome to Coming About with David Paragamian, the podcast that dives deep into the minds of leaders who have transformed their businesses and industries, paving the way for a better future. Here's Dave.
My guest this week on Coming About is Christian Bauman, a visionary, creative, and organizational leader. He's had a fascinating career that spanned over 2 decades, and for a decade and a half, he led as co-founder, president, and chief creative officer, one of the most creative, most highly awarded agencies in the business, H4B Chelsea. What's really interesting is the journey that led him there and the journey that is taking him to even new places. Anxious to get into all of that. What was a surprise to the industry, obviously, Christian, was that you stepped away from a leadership role in the healthcare communications agency business. So I'm anxious to hear about the new chapter that's about to unfold. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Dave. Thank you. It's fantastic to be here.
Oh, thank you. So why don't we start at the metaphorical beginning, Christian, because I think what might be fascinating for our listener is that your background is really different from a lot of agency creatives and agency CEOs. You served in the U.S. Army Waterborne. You've written novels. You've written music. And yes, of course, you've been an agency creative and an agency president. How has the diversity of those experiences shaped who you are as you approach your professional life?
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. And great question, and one I certainly get a lot. To me, I think the easiest thing is this. It's as with groups of people and organization. I just believe diversity makes us stronger, and I think I believe that in an individual as well. For me, having these different wells of experience to draw on allows me to bring different and sometimes unexpected perspectives to any given problem. So, I've always had fun with it. The one thing you said, you talked about my Army experience, and, I served from 1991 to 1995 as an enlisted soldier in the Army, in Somalia and Haiti and stuff. And, as a leader, to me, military experience takes leadership principles out of the academic or the theoretical, right? At school, it makes it very, very real, very, very quickly. Some in the obvious ways, right? Certainly in terms of accountability and responsibility, nobody would be surprised about that. The one I always think about the most as a leader, though, honestly, is motivation, right? Everyone has this stereotype in their head of what motivation means in the Army or the Marines, right? The drill sergeant screaming at you. And that, it's accurate in training, but it kind of stops there, right? Any good sergeant, any good NCO knows you don't actually motivate people by screaming at them, big surprise. There's some people in New York who don't know that yet, but good NCOs in the Army certainly do. You motivate them through esprit de corps, through personal connection, through empathy. They may not think about it that way or put into those words, but any good NCO knows that, and if you can make that connection, people will do whatever you ask of them that's reasonable, and they'll do it on their own. So, learning that, observing that in the military, has absolutely a parallel with the leadership roles I've had over the years and, in the business world.
Well, it's fun to listen to you speak like that, because I call that, and I know others call that, servant leadership, right? It's not about yourself. It's not about taking the seat at the head of the table and giving orders, but empowering others, giving them the vision, giving them the mission, and giving them the tools to succeed. And that's been, knowing your career the way I do, it's been the joy of watching you, because you've always put lots of air under other people. And I can think about a number of people who are in senior level roles in our industry, and you got them there. So I think that's exciting. On this theme of beginnings, how did you get your first big break? So I get it that you started out in the Army, getting those learnings, getting those experiences and those tours of duty, but how did you get your first big break in advertising?
I think that any of us in any aspect of the business world or any business actually know that, bosses and mentors, first off, make a huge difference, right, in your ultimate success. We all pull ourselves along, but having a really great boss and mentor along the way makes a huge difference, right? And I've been blessed to have some incredible ones. Brian Wheeler at Saatchi had a huge, huge impact on my advertising career, and even how I think about creative and how I think about treating people even, this guy you might have heard of, Dave Paragamian, the LMMP 16, 17 years ago, made a huge difference, again, both in my career and how I think about things. The legendary Donna Murphy, right, whom we have all worked for me, 15 years at Havas. I think I've learned more. I could learn more in 15 minutes with Donna about finance, organization, and negotiating than you could in a whole year in school. But if I was going to think about one circumstance that made a huge difference for me, again, there was 2 years kind of early in my career where I ran creative for Lyrica at Pfizer. It's a big brand at Pfizer, and it was just running creative then, not anything else. But I was teamed with incredible account partners, Anna Kotis, Kevin King. They're both still in the business, incredible people. It's one of those things, Dave, and I think that, we all look back on that. At the time, you did not realize how important something was going to be in terms of what you've learned. But I swear it was like advertising in business school, like in 2 years, and then I got paid for it because it was actually my job, right? And you think about the boxes checked off. For me, it was huge. It was the first big team I ran directly or indirectly, and that was important. As a creative, I came up through copy. This was the first time I had to supervise art as well, and the art directors. And that's the pivot, right, from manager to leader right there, right? When we're supervising our own discipline, whatever business we're in, if you're a rocket scientist supervising rocket scientists, that's managing. But when you're a rocket scientist who all of a sudden has to manage the guy who mows the lawn or whatever it is, or you're a copywriter who all of a sudden has to manage art directors and you literally don't know what they do or how they do it, that's where you make that switch from management to leadership. So that was huge for me. This was a big Pfizer launch. I mean, anyone in the industry at the time remembers that. It was US and global, right? It was my first big exposure to a global business. And I think the biggest thing for advertising certainly was the clients, right? I mean, again, this was some of the cream of the crop of Pfizer at the time on 42nd Street, working on that brand. The ability to learn from them, to watch them, to become friends with them was huge in those 2 years. And then also, and this is the kind of thing that we always say in advertising, to get ahead, you also have to make that transition from doer to rainmaker, right? And if you have those great client relationships, a lot of those people I work with on Lyrica, they scattered over the years to other places. And, many of them took me with them, right? And so that's huge, right? That's everything on our side of the business, on the advertising side of the business. So I just cannot discount those 2 years and how important they were to me.
So, one of the things, Christian, that you said that I would love to unpack a little bit is that idea that you almost didn't know it at the time, but that role on Lyrica, partnering with these great account leaders that you referenced in Anna Kotis and Kevin King, and working with some really talented marketers at Pfizer, you didn't know it at the time. And in fact, in some ways, I'm sure it was hard work and lots of travel and new people to manage and some long hours and a series of indication launches, one after another, that really challenged you and our whole agency at the time, right? But as you're going through that, and it's a little uncomfortable and it's hard, but it turns out to be this definitive moment that you can look back on over the course of your career and say, wow, that's where I went from manager to leader. And so I think certainly, as I think even about my own career, it's a similar thing of roles that I was thrust into that were a little uncomfortable. And now I look back and say, that was the pivotal role that really helped me. And certainly as I think about someone listening to the podcast, thinking about maybe if I'm a little uncomfortable, it's because I'm growing.
That's absolutely true. And it's funny, like you hear that as you're coming up through school and everything. And as a kid that, it's those uncomfortable moments that are going to make it for you and everything. It's something else to actually be in that moment and survive it though, right? Because it's terrifying. Even the Army, Dave, right? As a kid, as a teenager, I was basically a long-haired hippie. The Army was not something I was going to do, right? I ended up doing it because I was working blue collar at the time, and my daughter needed surgery, and the Army has healthcare and blah, blah, blah. Next thing you know, I'm in the Army, had never wanted to be there. And I was terrified of it because it was not something I asked for. It was not something I wanted. I learned I was really good at it. I was a really good soldier, and I succeeded in the Army, and I ended up enjoying it as well. And it was, as we've said, huge for me. I think we have those moments in business careers as well. And look, not everything we're thrust into ends up being something that we enjoy, right? We're also thrust into things where we're like, okay, that was a learning experience and I never want to do that again, right? But sometimes you get those ones where you do succeed at it against your own expectations and you find you enjoy it and it changes the trajectory of your career and your life.
You brought up something that I'd love to just touch on organically, which is that sometimes we are put in situations where you realize it's not the right thing. Any advice for the listener on, all right, so what do we do then? How do we get the bravery and the courage to navigate to a different point on the compass from that?
I think that's a great question. And I've said this a couple times to a couple people. I have a lot of respect for people who can look in the mirror and go, I'm not good at this, or I'm not enjoying this, and I'm going to make a change, right? I think that so many times we see in careers, people either voluntarily or involuntarily put themselves into positions or find themselves into positions, and then they can't quite be honest with themselves, and it never ends well, right? And sometimes they know why, and sometimes they don't know why. I can think of a couple people that stand out in my mind over the course of my career. I look at them and they were, there was this one guy in agency land and he so desperately wanted, job X, whatever it was. And we helped him get to job X. He got into job X. He did job X for a year and he was miserable. Now, what I've gotten used to is people doing that and then kind of just persisting because they think that that's what makes them successful. This guy looked in the mirror and he went, I'm miserable. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't mind admitting I don't want to do this anymore. I know that you've gone out of your way to help me get into this job. Can you help me again? How do I get out of this job? How do I find ways to be successful doing something else? To me, I think that's the key. And look, it doesn't always happen overnight. It certainly didn't always happen with me when I've made those decisions overnight. But I think over time, over the course of weeks and months, you just have to be honest with yourself. And if you're, one, you find you're not good at something, or two, you're not enjoying something, or your strengths lie elsewhere, just have that courage to make the change.
Christian, I couldn't agree more. Happiness counts. Life is indeed short. And so I think if you know something's not right, that's the time to take action, make a pivot. You shared some interesting advice that some of the very same people that help put you in a job, I find that 9 out of 10 of them, if you went to them and said, look, this is uncomfortable, this isn't working, this isn't right, let's engineer a change, they'll help you make that exit too. All right, Christian, let's put a pin in the conversation right there. But coming up next time on Coming About, Christian Bauman will share his thoughts on the importance of building culture in creative agencies.
Clients will come and go. They do, right? They absolutely do. Even great clients come and go, bad clients come and go. All this stuff comes and goes. Honestly, we'll even, turn the spotlight on you and I for a minute. Agency leaders come and go. The people that you work with, that's what really matters. And that's what makes up the culture. And that's why people stay in agencies or very quickly leave agencies.
This has been Coming About. We hope these conversations have left you feeling empowered and ready to take your organization to the next level. To speak with Dave about your business transformation or to learn more about Health Monitor Network, go to healthmonitornetwork.com. And don't forget to check out his book, Coming About: How We Transformed a Major Media Company and the Lessons There for You. Available wherever books are sold. Coming About with David Paragamian is a production of Advantage Audio.